I think it is a time now to introduce to this afternoon speaker, Tobias Putrih, and also his collaborator, Anton Perez. Thank you. Tobias is artist, and he comes from Slovenia, and for the last 10 years he is based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where he is teaching at program in Art, Culture and Technology at MIT. Well, this program has very specific sort of like disposition in connection to MIT. It has a history of 50 years bringing artists who are really exploring the very sort of like radical boundaries of what art is, right? Intersecting with science, intersecting with other disciplines, and also smuggling the knowledge between these disciplines. And I think this sort of like the figure of the cultural amphibian is something what is also dear to Tobias' practice. As we know from his work, he's been inquiring the history of the modern architecture from the critical perspective, but also pushing into the inquiry of the science, as he also has a background in science studies. There is a huge list of accolades. I'm not going to list because we have to catch the boat very soon. So I just want to ask you to join me in welcoming Tobias.
Thank you, look, I would like to present a project that's kind of in between. It's not really, it started like maybe 2 years ago, but in a way it's a project that's not, in a way, the work that I usually do. Because my work is usually linked to like architecture and more or less in the last 10 years kind of exploring kind of different ways of, in a way, question what module means and what modularity means and how is it connected to the history of modernism. And but in a certain sense, what I'm trying to do now in the last 10 years is connected to this project, but it's connected to purely to the visualization of knowledge, to the visualization of subjective knowledge. And I would just like to try to make certain like links between that exist maybe in the 60s, between also links between idea of modularity, an idea of modular knowledge, and what exactly is it, and how exactly it may also connect to the swamp. And I'll actually kind of look at the swamp mostly as from very abstract kind of point, as a complex system, and from the point of mostly system theory, and in the 60s, which was mostly based in architecture and economics. So I mean, it's like not maybe I'm poking my finger into something that I really don't understand, but maybe some of you have more knowledge about it. I'm not sure, so any feedback is very welcome. But first I would like to start with a strange story. I mean, it's a story of Brandon the Navigator, Irish saint, who sailed in 500, around early 6th century, with 12 pilgrims and I think 3 unbelievers, how it was described. And he sailed for 7 years, and supposedly he reached paradise. He stayed in paradise for 40 days, and then he returned. But what interests me in this kind of voyage is the moment when, he boards around the Easter on the way back. They find this island. They disembark, they light fire, but at that moment, island starts to move. They escape, and then Brandon tells the sailors that, well, God told him this is not an island. This is just a huge fish that chases its own tail. So it's like a kind of image of almost this Ouroboros image of the universe. So, but at the same time, it's an image of some sort of, an image of, how would I say, let's say, of some sort of, it's a very, very abstract image. And it's a territory that actually, does not exist. It's very movable territory, the territory that's always slipping away. And I think that's exactly because I think Thomas, before he was talking about this kind of territory where, between sea and land, between, territory that's moving away, territory that's present, but it disappears. So, and, in this kind of way of thinking, at a certain moment, I found this kind of expression of Holm, like English kind of old British kind of expression of like a piece of land next to the river that submerged under the flood. So, and, to think about these territories on the level of, let's say, knowledge. To think about this kind of non-defined territories and the way they can be defined. And I think, my intuition was to go back to the 60s, And there are two guys in the 60s who, stepped on this territory, stepped on this territory of complexity on the way they were first. Like, one was Herbert Simon, he was an economist. He received, I think, Nobel Prize in economics in the 70s for his work on decision making. But he wrote this text, Architecture of Complexity, which is like a crucial text for, even like the whole theory of design was kind of going back, like in the 80s and 90s, back to this relatively short text. And he talks about, if we want to comprehend a complex system, we need to inject certain level or hierarchy. We have to inject certain level of what he also talked about, decomposability. Every system, from mathematical system, symbolic systems, have certain need for our understanding. If we want the system to see and to perceive, to comprehend, we need certain structure. And the other direction to approach this is Christopher Alexander's work, which is approached mostly from the perception of making, for organizing built environment. And he proposes again this overlaps, this idea of certain structure. He called it pattern language, kind of library of actions, library of possibilities that people can use to superimpose on this complex environment and make sense of it. Make certain decision. It's a library, pick decisions you like, decisions you think you can use, and build your own environment. So, and as he says, like most of the wonderful places on the world are not made by architects, but by people. So to give the people certain tools, certain structure that they can use to create this kind of complex environment. And I think the third line is like kind of this strange shadow that kind of covers between or above these two different principles, which of course is a kind of this neoliberal like push for this decentralization. And this idea, idea behind Friedrich Hayek's work, that if you have a complex system, you cannot comprehend it. So it's a third kind of position, that you cannot approach it. You can look at it just from this kind of side view or this mirror view. And he called this mirror view price system. So it's a market. Market is the thing where you can observe complexity. You cannot observe no one, market is kind of assembled with different agents who bring knowledge and who have certain knowledge. But there is no central authority that control this knowledge. So it went kind of directly against kind of this, Marxist view of like central authority and central kind of decision making and the state itself in a way. So it's kind of interesting triangle, I think, that's worth, exploring on this way of like how to understand complexity of a swamp, of a knowledge, of built environment. So these are two different kind of, aspects. You can understand class from modular analysis or from the knowledge aggregation. And I would just like to go through some of if it's too intense, sorry about it. Just like, what exactly modularity means. Because I think it's really crucial to understand, if we want to understand swamp or knowledge through some sort of system theory, I think module is the kind of building kind of brick of this system. And in mathematics, basically, it's this precondition for to be able to understand. And if no modular system is available, basically sooner or later we have to confront it. So, on one side, we have this understanding of complexity. On the other hand, we have the other kind of way, it's how to build complexity. So if one is kind of this systematic approach, system theory, the other is basically design theory, basically like architecture, and kind of this, Christopher Alexander's kind of direction. And here are just two ways that will be, it will start to be that abstract, but I want to just to kind of lay out, because it's very important because I would like to revisit certain very corporate example, how complexity is approached in the last 10 years. And because why this kind of modularity of organization and basically why system theory became so kind of important in the last 10 years is because it was taken by major corporations, mostly Google and kind of more, all these big players. And because they were looking for efficiency. Because from Taylorism on, it's, the whole system is geared toward, more efficient way of producing things and knowledge. And basically, modular design, from purely abstract point, usually increases efficiency of knowledge, of exchange, but on the other hand, it usually decreases efficacy. So, understand the difference. So efficiency is something you put in, and it's very efficiently divide and produce something. Efficacy is level of intensity. So usually modular system, because of their interface, because of many interfaces, can't achieve that level of super performance, but they're very efficient. And this is one kind of around, because it started this, in a way, corporate kind of, let's say, modification starting around 90s to be more pronounced. And there are a couple of papers in the 90s that kind of push this idea of reorganization of corporate structure from pyramids to more modular kind of system. And now I'd like to go to more kind of concrete examples. This is a screenshot from Thomas Hedervik website, when 3 years ago he was commissioned with Bjarke Ingels to design new headquarters, Google headquarters in California. And of course, he came with this very kind of, system theory description. You need like modular, open space that can be reconfigured, that can be changed in a minute, that can be utilized in this kind of multifunctional and very open way. Here, there's one rendering from his website. So you have an open space, it can be reconfigured, it can be, it's very deregulated, I would say. It's like kind of very spontaneous. And here is recent screenshot from the Google's blog. This is Google's Rework blog, and it's their new corporate organizational chart. So suddenly, top value in the Google organization chart becomes psychological safety. And it's a huge shift, and then you have all this corporate kind of salad that follows. So, but what, team members feel safe to take risk and be vulnerable, in front of each other. Okay, so let's go a little bit back. Let's go to the 60s, because there is a crucial experiment, like in this psychology, I would say, and economic theory done in beginning 60s, Perry project. It started in 63, 130 low-income, 3 years old students were selected, with probably, and 60 of them were like real, and then another 60, a little bit more were a negative kind of control group. And they were followed, their lives were followed for 40 years. And, they were given this very precise kind of training school that lasted, I think, 3 years. In this, from year 3 to year 6, or no, a certain short period of time. And it was mostly structured on Lev's Vygotsky kind of educational theory. So it was very participatory, it was kind of engaging. They had to, kids had to form their own groups, kids had to, basically be quite, the goal was to kind of develop individuality, very individual kind of principle of interaction. And what they realized, in a way, is that, yes, of course, this training, this kind of school, increased their IQ test. This is like kind of the Stanford Binet intelligence scale test. It's kind of the standard test for IQ testing. But after some time, they realized that, this test actually didn't increase after a long time. In 10 years period, like control group performed the same as a normal group. So obviously, their cognitive ability did not improve. But, in this 40 years, what really improved, their outcome, their life stories were clearly statistically improved. So the question was, if it's not cognitive ability, what it is? What else is there that we are not measuring? And basically, they called it like, social ability, social intelligence. And this is one of the crucial papers that came out, I think, in late 90s, which defined psychological safety. Basically telling that there is this psychological safety that's, certain, way of how groups communicate. And this is purely, I don't know what paper, it's like administrative quarterly, something paper, like it's hardcore kind of organizational science. And that, in a way, psychological safety offers certain, new way how to increase productivity and efficiency of the teams. And the second paper came out like maybe 12 years later. It was like Carnegie Mellon and Media Lab that actually really pinpointed like this, clearly pinpointed that yes, if you have a group that's, and they call this factor C, which is like social sensitivity, which is measured by the special test that was developed in the 90s, that's commonly used now in psychology to measure social intelligence. But they said that group that had average kind of group of 3 to 5 that had average participants, and they took equal distribution of conversational turn-taking and proportion of females in the group. They, in general, performed better as groups of high-performing individuals, which didn't follow this conversational turn-taking and didn't have equal amount of number of men and women in the group. So what they're saying is that high-performing individual performs, or a group of high-performing individual performance is lower than group of average performing, individuals. And I think this, it has kind of profound kind of effect on the whole corporate organization. So suddenly, it's not anymore about individual and high-performing individual and the one who, genius who can drive the process, but it's about participatory organizational structure that increases this magic efficiency of the company. And another kind of parallel level, parallel kind of way, is that the strange thing that because with the change of the work environment from the 1980s on, number of jobs available in U.S. market that were like low social, low math, or low social and high math clearly decreased. So labor market clearly demanded more socially related, socially intensive jobs. And here you can see, so all the, how they call STEM jobs, which are usually like technical jobs, science-related jobs clearly decrease. A number of, you see teacher, managers, nurses, health technicians, increased by a huge margin. And then there is this kind of reality of the market that, Google realized quite early on that education is clearly, the point to invest. So basically today, most of the primaries or most of the schools in US are run on Google platform, even though, they earn still much less than, for example, Apple, and they're also selling, computers to the schools, or even giving computers to the schools. And this is just a quote from the, from the Google Education group leader. So, and now, if you connect all these dots, where I think it becomes a profound kind of shift, from this kind of cognitive cognitive way of thinking into this kind of socially intensive kind of way of organizing and kind of participatory, in this case, corporate organizing. And for me, in this kind of project, because I would, from my perspective, if, I'm thinking about modularity, about organization of the space, about also organization of knowledge, how does this affect exactly my own thinking? How can you, because also like looking from my direction, from my personal, my very subjective, way of making things, the question is, what is my agency? What if I give my objects or my systems that I create to people and they create certain participatory environment, what exactly do I achieve? If there is this corporate, push towards efficiency, can I use this kind of way of organizing in this kind of knowledge I just present and turn it around into like kind of almost like, this kind of community organizing or community forming or community kind of level? Does this knowledge really help or not? And in what way it helps? And, and because project in very concrete terms is basically, my question was, if I have not, how can you visually organize the knowledge? And more precisely is, can you link knowledge to color? Can you create certain system that's loose enough, but that can still kind of serve as a tool for as a module for a certain organization? And of course, this is in a way a quite old problem. It started with Kevin Lynch in the 50s and Gorgi Kepes. Here you have like a nice map from Boston. It continued with Friedrich Jameson in the 80s and his definition and his kind of appropriation of Lynch's ideas. And it went on through like people like, Pierre Levy in the 90s, and now recently like Serenchik and Williams in their kind of discussion of, capitalism and kind of proposal of knowledge mapping as a tool, as a useful tool that could serve as a certain organizing and giving certain agency to people. Mostly like how to use knowledge, how to use subjective knowledge, how to visualize knowledge. Because if you know what your knowledge, if you know what you have, basically you are gaining some agency, some sort of, power. And of course, then you have like many different, because now then I had to go to this huge problem of taxonomy. Taxonomy, different ways of taxonomy, different visualizations, and how the problem is solved. And here is nice kind of visualization by this Knowledge Space Lab, Netherlands. It's Wikipedia. It's visualization of the links and knowledge in Wikipedia. This is comparing Wikipedia knowledge with inner donut, which is UDC. It's an old system. It's a universal decimal system that many libraries use for sorting their knowledge. And what we did with Anton and Carlos And I forgot to mention, Carlos is his PhD student at computation, design and computation at MIT. And we try to, in a way, create a software that, in a way, kind of scrubs your personal data, in this case, just your browsing history. And with this, now it's simple machine learning kind of algorithm, but it would not have to be at this point. So it kind of spits out certain categories, and you have to name these categories. You have to, as you know what you browsed, you have to write. You have to kind of name these clouds. And after you name these clouds, they're visualized. This, for example, I did it just this afternoon. So they're visualized, and what you have to do is you have to connect the category to a certain color. And so we are looking if there is some correlation between color and your subjective category. If there is some kind of relationship between perception of color and perception of knowledge. And, you know, this is one old one, and, you know, and then looking at what kind of, if this step is somehow kind of makes sense, if there is some correlation between, some kind of connection between color and knowledge, you know, what kind of visualization can really, because I think these kind of images, in a way, are useful as long as they're comparable. If they're like comparable, then, you know, if people know that certain knowledge means certain color, they could mean something. If not, that's so, but it's on the level of pure experiment. So probably we will see if it works or it doesn't. So yeah, that's it.
Speaking about psychological safety, you meant this experiment with kids that took for 40 years, and you mentioned two groups, control and the other one whose life was better. So what are the criterions of better life? Is it making more money? Is it being a star, or just being happy?
No, they're quite measurable things like income, number of arrests, what else? Number, you know, how many times they divorced. Then, I mean, I have to look, but there are like almost like 20 different criteria which can be measured by number. It's very econometric paper. It's very, you know, it's kind of a little bit scary, but you know, it's kind of statistically, they made it the way that's statistically measurable.
Do this better life criterion correlate with happiness?
Probably not, but look, I think Google people think so. I mean, I don't know. It's like I try to be, I try to present it as a fact. Of course not. I mean, yeah.
Could you open the first picture with the paradise and Arctic heaven? This mythological picture you started, you know, and if it's possible. And there are, I would say, two different possibilities, as a minimum possibilities to interpret. One of them very, I would say, Disneylandian or Disneyland interpretation that, okay, there are many places in Disneyland that you could go, it's not serious. And this is game. I just reject this one interpretation. And the other, you remember that from the medieval ages and Renaissance, the death was included into our life. It means that death was always presented between us as the beginning of our life. It means that everything was near us, and from the other side, it was not system. I think that this model, on my opinion, quite interesting to apply to architecture. For example, and urbanism, for example, we see that we would like to exclude the death of buildings or the death of territories in order not to allow people to visit these places, or just to exclude or explain people not to go to this place, like swamps, the same. Never go to swamp because it's dangerous, blah, 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 you know, and you will not never see. And so we exclude the beginning, the building of builds, you know, and the death of them, because you could visit only in the system, in systematic, efficient condition, you know, but not in the period of transformation where the system, or rather the sphere of the architecture or system disappear and starts to be symbiotic, open for the weather, you know, for the everything after this. Originally, it's interesting that urbanists and state, city power invite social groups to take these buildings under condition of death, you know, because it was not like planned as a system. And how do you think when you discussed about your systematical approach, could you include the death and beginning of the city and buildings as some kind of sort of life, and swamping between swamping between these buildings, or urban swamping, you know, as a different sort of communication with urbanism of people?
Yeah. But look, I think, don't you think that, because I understand, you think, do you think this is not a system?
I think this is not a system.
Yes, but
I
but in a way,
contradict system.
Yeah, but it is certain symbolic system.
Yeah, you could call it. We will never agree.
Yeah.
But there are two possibilities.
I mean, yes, there is difference between kind of measurable rational systems and this very unrational symbolic kind of map. Yes, I agree. And but I think my intention with this, like, you know, to inject, like, in this very systematic approach, question of color, which is purely non-systematic, is, you know, could kind of create certain kind of very uneven territory, very vague and very kind of in this direction, more or less like this map than, you know, any measurable, you know, quantity of.
But I started my question not from Disneyland, not accidentally, because Disneyland is systematic. You could include hell as an element of system into your Disneyland, and paradise, the place of paradise, into your system, because the death is always included into Disneyland, and it's not real death. But when I'm talking about that it's not system, you couldn't include death of buildings into your system, because death is always over, you know, or transcend the system. This is my point, why it's not a system. You could actually interpret this picture in Disneyland sense.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be interesting to think how really death works in a one like Alexander system, like, you know, Christopher Alexander system, which, you know, he proposed certain pattern language, certain library of things, and I'm not sure if there, you know, what sort, you know, destruction is also part of this language probably because it's so fragmented, and you can use in whatever way you want. So that would really, but
the weather don't have any idea how to describe. It's outside of our rationality.
Yeah.
Any other question?
So
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's a question or comment, but also been followed by this discussion of what is system and what is not a system. So maybe how do you think, like, do you Tobias see or like where do you draw the difference between system and ecology? Because like for me, maybe this image, maybe it's not a system in the rational way, but I would argue with you that it's a system. Because it's something like a kind of a complete ecology for me of things and ideas, and kind of a cycle which sustain things.
But I think even like in Simon's kind of example is he didn't really talk about systems. He talked about hierarchy, about decomposability. So it's which are more vague terms, I think, and more
then structures, right?
It's like because certain hierarchy kind of in one or another way enables you to observe through certain kind of in a certain way. So environment, I don't know, ecology.
I very much appreciate the idea. I don't know if I understand it correct. Like bringing color in that, because it would allow certain contingencies, right? It would allow certain like this kind of blurred parts, which for me is not excluded from the system. It's like it's a space. So maybe like I don't appreciate much the term of system. I guess for this type.
I mean it's very harsh term.
For this type of. I think it's about like structures, because it's more kind of open and all-inclusive. When we think about systems, maybe because I'm an architect, it's some sort of idea of the top-down sort of organization, right? And it's
but that's the point. That's not system. System is mostly like bottom up in this.
But in a way that we think it's complete in that sense. It's not like top down and bottom up, but in a way that the system is all included and completed. So there would be no place for your color then, or would be?
What do you mean? Can you?
That if it's like where do you position yourself? Is every system would allow this kind of contingency from outside, or is it embedded in the system?
Well, system is defined by its closure. So.
Is it?
If you want to perceive it, of course it is.
I mean, for me, that's a kind of discussion that you say it is not a system and this is a system in a way. So how do you define that? Like, where is the closure in that case? I mean, that's a comment.
Maybe just a short note on system and death. I mean, death is one of the prime and integral parts of systems, because I just think about life cycle systems, right? I mean, we heard yesterday about the life cycle and death of one building that is integrating in the life of another building within the time span of 10 years. So like that is very important for systems to keep going, right? To exist. And at the same time, death it may be the key for the opening of the system. So I'm trying to like triangulate between several concepts here. And at the same time, regarding death, opening, and system, what will be the opening and death in terms of color transitions? What would be the death color or the death pixel in your system? This is not a question, this is a comment we will probably have to leave at some point soon. But I'm very intrigued with these triangulations that might happen between your comments and the visual and design outputs of that trajectory.
That should be pink.
I'm not sure. Do we have time for further discussion, or we should get going? Because we need to leave from the boat.
5 minutes. We have to be out.
So I'll remain my apology. Thank you.